Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Thrive with Kate podcast. We're here with Amy Alkon, who has a new book called Going Menopausal. She's super fun. We're having a good time. And so we're going to talk a lot about what is going on in the field of applied science with perimenopause and menopause and this whole idea of what you and your doctor need to know about the real science of menopause and perimenopause. Let's just jump right in with you've had a long history on applied science and writing and being on TED Talks and being on the Joe Rogan show. And there's a dive deep into the science part of your personality and writing history. So let's just start there, especially for people who don't really know what applied science is or what the journalistic people who are in journalism and research and what they're bringing to the table. So give people a little idea of...
Sure. No, I very insistently tell people I'm not a journalist because I don't just report what people say. And I'm also quite disrespectful. People will say, oh, respect this. No, I respect this researcher because they're at Harvard and whatever. I don't care. I don't care at all. You could be, a guy who's living on the street. And if you are brilliant on science and you bring the evidence, I'm going to listen to you. I value that. And so the way I started out, I actually gave free advice on the street corner in Soho, New York, with two friends because I'm a madcap person. So you and I, if we lived in the same place, we'd have a lot of fun. I already was wishing you'd come here and so we could go out for drinks. But anyway, so we do this and, I have no expertise and people start asking us serious questions. And we did this, by the way, free because, Lucy, the nickel from Peanuts, 5 cents advice. Yeah. We didn't think anyone would even give us a nickel, but free, New York, they line up around the block. So people are asking us, the stuff on our signs like wigs and beards, proper spelling, really this sort of stuff that we could legitimately give advice on. And then some people ask some more serious questions. And I thought, oh, this is so irresponsible. And so I'm just this huge reader. I read through all of psychology and discover Freud just made stuff up. It's crazy. And Albert Ellis became a sort of mentor to me. He is the co-founder of cognitive behavioral therapy, but the better arm of it, rational emotive behavior therapy. And before I even knew him, I was writing a column in the New York Daily News, out of the advice ladies, my partners, they broke off and didn't want to do it anymore. And he was a fan, which is the coolest thing because I was a fan of his. And I felt this credentialist sort of nonsense. Oh, I should get a PhD. Now, I read piles and piles and piles of science. I don't need anyone to whip me or give me a grade or anything. And Ellis said, no, be a waste of your time. And actually, what was really important was that if you have a PhD, you have to narrowcast. So you're just an expert in one area. And I am transdisciplinary. So I wrote a syndicated column in about 100 papers on love, dating, sex, and relationships. It's science-based. And I did that until so many papers died, like around 2022, that I just had to stop because there were no papers left. So I was financing my column. But through this process, I became more and more immersed in science. I'm an expert in evolutionary science. And I met this epidemiologist and biostatistician. He's very generous, Sandra Greenland. And I expressed desire. I was worried, how do I properly vet the science, critique the science? And so he coached me informally over a number of years. And so I became very rigorous at this. And what he also did, he sent me stories of medical fraud and abuse and errors. He's the guy, he wrote co-authored the seminal textbook in epidemiology, and he's behind reforming methodology in science and medical science. So it was really important to have his influence. I get all these reports, horrifying things, people getting hip replacements where it was made of a toxic substance, pointless medical care, just more than anyone can imagine. I'm sitting here at my temperate Venice, California place in my office. It's like 55 degrees here year round. It's so nice. And all of a sudden I'm locked in a trunk in the Everglades. I'm sweating and hot and it's horrible. And I realize, I think that was a hot flash. And because what I want to do, what we all want to do is to go to our doctor and say, wow, I'm really uncomfortable. What should I do? And do I ever know better than that? Because I know, as the U.S. National Academy of Medicine says, that more than half of our medical care is not based in adequate evidence. Notice they don't say rigorous evidence or excellent evidence. And this is from 2011. So medicine's more and more complex. So it's probably much greater now. And that is my experience with every doctor I have, except the psychiatrist who prescribes me ADHD medicine. He is evidence-based, and it is a joy, and I can trust him. I'll question him on things, but every other doctor, they'll say something to me. Head of endocrinology at Kaiser, like a week ago or something, he says there's something called sex hormone binding globulin that binds with steroid hormones, which estrogen and progesterone, both of our menstrual cycle hormones are. And so it takes them by binding it with them. That means it sails them out of your system and you don't get the effects from the estrogen you're taking. So I have some reasons that I'm not getting. I get about half the estrogen I take compared with other women, and this is lab tested and everything. Anyway, so he tells me, well, if you take estrogen, it's going to raise your SHBG. And I said, well, no, if I take oral estrogen, which is not safe compared with transdermal, which is where you have a sticker you put on your skin. Actually, you put on your butt, so I should be touching there. Yes, if I took oral, that substantially raises your SHBG, but I'm using transdermal, which raises it negligibly. I should not be the genius here. And I say genius in a sarcastic way. I don't have any arrogance about this. I have horror. Every doctor I have, it's like that, where I know the science really well across disciplines and they don't. And this guy, he's really nice too. Gives me tests I need. He cares. There are many signs that he's a good doctor to the best of his ability. But really, one of the myths that I bring out in my book, Going Menopausal, is that doctors in med schools are not trained to read science. They don't know how to read it. They don't know how to critically evaluate it. And then if you're at an HMO like mine, Kaiser Permanente, they need to see a lot of patients so we can afford our care. You see a patient every 20 minutes if you're a doctor there. Then you have electronic medical records, keeping requirements. So they don't have time to read studies, even if they wanted to, even if they were able to. And so this is one of the huge problems. And in my book, it's interesting because I was initially very mad, at my gynecologist, when I first needed, a prescription, but doctors are not at fault. My gynecologist, he's a really good guy. I love him. He's careful and prudent and listens to patients. This is the fault in the medical care you're getting that's not scientific, is medical education and institutions. And it's just terrible.
Yeah. I was a pretty early adopter in the online wellness course creation space. And so back in, I think by 2011, I was trying to bring some of my colleagues onto online platforms to be able to work with people and teach. And so Dr. Claudia Welch and I, who wrote Balance Your Hormones, Balance Your Life, back in 2011, we created a course called Healthier Hormones. And it was all diet and lifestyle driven from the healing science of Ayurveda from India. And I know a lot of my listeners, a lot of the people in my yoga healer past world, it's like they don't even think of going to, like a Kaiser Permanente, to an allopathic, to an HMO for, I would say to feel better, for stage of life transitions, or for anything that they know is that they don't want it to end up in a prescription.
Right.
Really.
You know what?
You know what I mean?
I get it, because I was anti-drug. I grew up that way. It was my family. You didn't take drugs. And I actually was I thought estrogen was Satan around 2002 when I first heard of the Women's Health Initiative study. Very, crap methodology, fraudulently announced. It's really terrible. But what I read, and being scientific is going from, oh my God, estrogen is Satan, I will never take it. That was my knee-jerk opinion in 2002. As a very far from menopause young woman and, not really reading this stuff. And then I didn't read the science the way I do now. So doing this book, I thought, well, okay, we're going to read the science on this horrible, horrible substance, which is a hormone in our body. Estrogen and progesterone are our menstrual cycle hormones. They are very important. They work together. Estrogen is involved in every process, every organ in the body. Progesterone is neglected. We'll get to that. But when I read the science, I saw, oh my God, not only does estrogen help your symptoms in menopause, it is more powerful for hot flashes really than anything else. Not in perimenopause. There's a reason not to take estrogen in perimenopause for most of us. But I saw it is protective. It protects your bones. It protects your brain. It protects your cardiovascular system. And that is especially important because 1 in 3 women will soon die of heart disease. Right now, it's 1 in 5. So if you have breast cancer, chances are you will die of heart disease and not breast cancer. It's really, really terrible. And I don't poo-poo, any sort of risks, but that's a whole other subject we can get into if you want. Estrogen, progesterone, do they cause breast cancer? And the answer is no, they are not carcinogens. Yeah. If you have existing cancer, they can run with it. But they don't generate the cancer. And the Women's Health Initiative study that fraudulently claimed they caused breast cancer, what happened was people 3 months after getting into the study, some of them were diagnosed with cancer. Well, cancer has an extremely slow doubling rate, except for some rare kinds. I mean, it develops over a period of decades, or it definitely more than 3 months, if not decades. So it goes from 1 cell to 2 cells. That's doubling. And so this was outrageous, and they frightened all these women. So all these women who could have had their hearts and brains and bones protected by estrogen and progesterone, its partner, they threw their hormones in the toilet or the trash. A lot of toilets very protected. Their bones protected. Sorry, that was a sort of failed joke. I knew it as I was making it. And it really was harmful. They harmed all these women, these scientists who did this, careerist, dishonest, sloppy. And this is the kind of thing this is why I wrote the book, the going menopausal, that outrage. It's 2 things. One is that some of us, including me, I had horrible perimenopausal symptoms. And perimenopause, I should say, is the 3 to 10 years leading up to menopause. It's a hormonally unique state. But so it's those mental health symptoms where you feel inexplicably angry and rage, or, you can feel depressed and anxious. And then the outrage also is about how dare they, the medical system, the medical institutions betray women who are trusting them. They bill themselves as providing modern evidence-based care, and they're not, and they can't. And they actually force doctors to violate medical ethics when they have no experience treating or no education in menopause and perimenopause or treating patients. All these gynecologists, they're all baby doctors. Most of them. If there's one who has any expertise in a department, it's actually rare. They're getting to be more. But let's talk about those experts. Those experts, they take an online course at the Menopause Society. Here in California, that's what you do if you run a stop sign. You go to traffic school online. So this is like traffic school for vaginas. And this is not the same thing as having some crusty old doctor who's been been doctoring for his whole life, kick your butt in clinical rotation and challenge your diagnosis. That's what an educated, informed expert doctor, that's how they're generated, and they're not generating them. So when they say they're menopause experts, the one at Kaiser, I mean, it is ludicrous, the stuff she says to me. I have these appointments with all these gynecologists because mine is gone. My great, wonderful, he's a man. I love that people say, I wouldn't go to a male gynecologist. It's like, well, if you got glioma, brain tumor, do you require someone to have your same brain tumor? He's a doctor, and he listens, and he's great and provides care according to my values. And this is important for women who don't want to take hormones. You don't want a doctor pushing them on you. You want to know, how can I be healthy? I'm not going to take estrogen for whatever reason I can't, or I'm not comfortable with it. And, in my book, I showed how I saw that I was wrong about that I want to do what's healthiest, but not everybody will feel that that's for them. That's fine. So you want that doctor to say, here are the lifestyle measures that will help you be at your healthiest. I give them the ways to eat and exercise. And when you talked about the applied science thing, I didn't answer that well. What that means is that when you're an advice columnist, you write an advice column every week and you connect with your readers. And to me, it would just be a horrible betrayal of my readers if I gave advice that nobody would take, that wouldn't help anyone. So it's always like, I call myself names. Hey, A, and it ends with whole. This advice you're planning on putting in paragraph 3, is anybody going to do this? And is anybody going to keep doing this? And if the answer is no, well, Alkon, do better. And I have to, come up with something like that. So my book is full of that. And I see when people write books, the advice is not very doable. We are not saints. We are grabby, lazy chimps who, want ice cream. And I'm first in line for all of that, grabby, lazy. And so, well, here's an exercise measure. where you can do this without leaving your house, without having to put on Lululemon or buy whatever it is, without joining a gym and then not going to the gym, then feeling bad. So then you've got another problem. You give yourself problems, and a way to eat that's delicious, that doesn't require a lot of intense cooking, but that will keep you the healthiest, the least inflamed, not having insulin resistance, a broken insulin response throughout your lifetime, and having bones and muscles that are healthy without you having to do extensive work, weight work, it's weights. That's the thing, is certain type of weightlifting.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's talk a little bit about when you were the past president of the Applied Evolutionary Psychology Society. What I'm curious about evolutionary psychology and just evolution and where that intersects menopause is women are living longer. And so how does that, in your research, what did you find with how that intersects with our evolution as a sex?
Well, so we don't really know why women stop having periods and go through menopause. There is something called the grandmother hypothesis, which is that you need to have a woman who's not having children, who's not burdened with her own children, so she can care for the grandchildren. But that's just a hypothesis. We don't really know why this is. But the way I use evolutionary psychology in this book, or evolutionary science, is to look at behaviors. And I use the work of Randy Nesse, who is just wonderful, the co-founder of evolutionary medicine. And he describes something, I put it in the book, the viewing symptoms as disorders error. And this is when a doctor looks at you come in, you have a complaint, and they treat that instead of doing what they must do if they're practicing evidence-based scientific medicine, which is to look for the underlying cause. So if I come in with a headache, I could be stressed out, or I could have a brain tumor. And so evolution, what we look at is that the emotions we have, the reactions our body has, they're often adaptations, they're signals. Sometimes they're just noise, but the brain tumor, the headache, tells you something's wrong, do something about it. And so with doctors who don't know evolutionary science, and by the way, my psychiatrist does, I sent him Randy Nesse papers. When I got fired by my previous guy because I asked questions. He didn't like that. And I go to this new guy, I'm suspicious. And so I sort of rage sent him Randy Nesse's work. And he said, "Oh, I love his work. I know it very well." And you could have knocked me over. I mean, from that point on, I thought, oh, he's somebody different. Anyway, it's this stuff of doctors prescribing antidepressants for women who have hot flashes. Now, those will decrease your hot flashes, not as well as estrogen. But oh my God, there are all these costs to taking them. It's really terrible. Tapering for some people, they cannot get off them. They have terrible withdrawal symptoms. That's horrible. And they have, effects on, there are various adverse effects that come with them. And what you're not doing by treating symptoms, oh, I have hot flashes, you're then neglecting all the other things that go on in menopause, and perimenopause, bones, that your bones, the last chance you have to make your bones, to build bone really, really well is in perimenopause. Once you're in menopause, you can maybe, if you do the slow speed weight training I do, but you may not be able to be, maybe just hanging on to what you have by doing exercise. And so, it's very important that you have as much help as you can get if you want to take estrogen. That is so important for your bones. And what's important too, the head of gynecology at Kaiser West LA, big Kaiser, important Kaiser, she tells me, I was on with her first before I got on with all the other people who are denying me care on unscientific terms. It's like, I get half the estrogen I take. Can I get double? Because then it'll be the amount I'm supposed to have. Oh, no, that's a super physiologic dose. No, it would be for someone else, but my body chomps up half. You see it from my lab tests, here. So she says to me, "Whoa, you're 61. You should taper estrogen at 60. It's not safe to take it." Okay. That was research from 2002, the Fraudulent Error-Ridden Women's Health Initiative study, where they tested estrogen on 79-year-old women. Okay, if you take estrogen when you're broken, when you're not healthy, it will break you further. And what we've seen from the research is healthy. It's called the window of opportunity, or the timing hypothesis. And it's a supported hypothesis that if you take estrogen, initiate it as a healthy woman, meaning you don't have a lot of plaque and heart disease, you need to get tested for that. I lay out all the tests in my book. So you can then take estrogen, initiate it then, and take it probably throughout your life, but you need to be monitored, because the time you need it is when you're 79 for your bones. That's when women fall and break bones. And so if I stop at 60, it not only reverses the effects of taking estrogen, the positive effects, it goes backward a little bit, but you don't have the protection when you need it. And so this is horrible advice. And by the way, it was reversed. It was debunked in 2004 and some more. And so this woman, head of gynecology at Kaiser, the big Kaiser, choosing the formulary for menopausal women, among others, for Kaiser. I mean, crazy. She is giving, partying like like it's 1999. She's doing medical care like it's 2002. I mean, that's egregious. And this is why I wrote this book, because I got the progesterone in perimenopause that I needed to sleep and stop my symptoms. That was what you need. Oral micronized progesterone and 300 milligrams of that. That's what they take in France. You need that because you need to protect your endometrium, your uterine lining, and your breasts, and you don't know your level of metabolizing steroid hormones, and that's the safe level. Progesterone has fewer side effects than aspirin, and I take the FDA-approved kind that's molecularly the same as the kind in my body, same as with estradiol. We call it estrogen, that's a general name, but estradiol is the substance in our bodies, the steroid hormone. And believe me, I'm not, my family, we're prejudiced against taking drugs. I never thought I would, but it was a scientific thing to do. And I listened to what the science says, and see where it all shakes out. And, I have to be careful. If I have an intuition about something, I need to ignore that and look and see, especially then look hard to see, Amy, maybe you're wrong. Come on, really? And that's scientific thinking and not the orthodoxy. And you're more prone to have that. You go to medical school, they teach you, here's what is. And, it's expensive and important and shiny. And I'm Amy Alkon in my little grubby office here with piles of paper. I mean, it's not really grubby. It's just untidy. I was like, oh, okay, no. I revise that. Push the back button. And so I'm not impressed by anybody. I'm not taught anything that this is the way. So I look at everything. I look back in the history. I look at the old research, see what wasn't redone that needed to be redone with modern methods. And it is just terrible. We women, this is the most patient-betraying area of our medical care, menopause and perimenopause.
Yeah. Yeah. When I read The Upgrade, which is How the Female Brain Gets Stronger and Better in Midlife and Beyond by Luann Brizendine, in those studies from 2002, and that's kind of one of my questions with, because we're living longer, right? Because we have this phase of life that is now at least half of it if we're living really long. Like in yogic world, the idea is live to 100. And that's historic, right? Where that was the goal. And so the stages of life, we're aware of these longer cycles that, for most women who are going through perimenopause at, let's say, 45 to 55, then half of their life is without estrogen. So one of the things that I'm interested in, and I think this is where our evolutionary bend maybe has some good.
Sorry, I took her out before. Let me just take out, there's a tiny dog. We all have vision problems in this house. She needs to be taken out. I hear her barking. Okay, Aida, where are you, honey? Okay, come here. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Okay, sweetheart, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry, I'm coming back. Sorry, it's just doggy.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, she's 6 pounds, Chinese crested, and just needs to be dropped down the stairs. Okay, now I'm going to look like a weird ghost for a while. Okay, now I'm back. Okay.
Yeah.
So
right.
You were saying, sorry.
So part of our overlap is in evolution, right? So you're more in evolutionary psychology. I wrote a book, Primal Habits, which is part of a larger book I wrote called Uninflamed, which really looked at what were the habits that humans had when our brains were 10% bigger, which came from an interview I did with Dr. Mark Madsen, who had done the most research in the NIH on intermittent fasting and was looking at the evolutionary, how has agriculture affected human evolution?
Right. The past 10,000 years, we've only had agriculture that long. We've only had carbs for that long, basically.
Yeah. So that was the data. That was the data set. And when I was looking at Primal Habits, one thing, because I've led this online global community for a long time, and we're very much interested in citizen data. And so what are real people doing? And what I kind of wanted to say earlier about the healthier hormones course, it's there's so much, it's depending on who you talk to, you get really different advice, and depending what system of medicine you're studying. And as Americans, most of us think, well, the only system is going to the doctor. But if people who come from different areas of the world, there's really different ways of practicing medicine.
Can I just interject something? Because I'm not a snob about about
Yeah.
science. And so I go with what Marcia Angel says. She was the former editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, and she is really speaks out against medical abuse and error and research. She's wonderful. And she said that there isn't, I forget how she said, there isn't like, natural science and science. There's only science. Oh no, I'm sorry. I locked the dog out because I ran back in. God, I mean, really, Amy. See, you can see she's so sophisticated. Yeah, except when she's like a bumbling
Oh, you were good. We're
bad
good.
memory jerk. So let's see if I can get de-radioactive. Okay, I am. I was saying, that she said there's only, science has been adequately studied and proven to work, and science that hasn't. And the problem is when you have substances that no one's going to make a ton of money on, the vitamin D or this root or that root. Well, they don't do multi-million-dollar NIH studies about it. And so that's a problem. So what we have, it's called anecdote rather than data. If it's just like, here's what happened to me, because it can be coincidental. And so while I'm not a snob about where the stuff comes from, I also recognize that it's very important to make sure that, there are certain things that are important in studies that it's controlled, meaning there's a control group, people who don't get it, you compare to the other people who do, and that the methodology is correct. They're studying what they think they're studying instead of Kevin Hall, the guy who did these huge NIH studies, like it's millions and millions of dollars. Gary Tubbs, my friend who was big, low carb was substantially spread to the world by him. He said that Kevin Hall, instead of actually studying the low fat versus the very low fat, maybe versus very low carb diet, what he was actually studying is, because his methodology was wrong, was switching. What's the effect of switching from low fat to low carb or low carb to low fat, which is a question no one needs the answer to, comparing the switching.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And so this is big, famous researchers. I'm impressed by nobody. They make these errors. I just look at your research. And by the way, I want to credit this incredible woman. I wouldn't have written this book if I hadn't found her research. She was the one who initially showed me, oh my God, the gap between the medical care and the science. Her name is Geraldine Pryor. She is an endocrinologist and former clinician, meaning former doctor who treats patients at UBC. And she is the one who saw to it that progesterone, the substance, or the steroid hormone our body makes, was properly studied and properly addressed as a way to help keep women healthy. And then also perimenopause, doctors mistakenly, erroneously think that, and researchers too, think that perimenopause is like menopause light, that your estrogen is just declining, when actually for many of us, it spikes terribly, making us sick. And if we're not making progesterone, which is the problem in perimenopause that causes most of the horrible symptoms, then we are unhealthy. We're not protected against breast cancer or uterine cancer, and our bones, just countless areas of our body are left without this necessary hormone. And one of the big things is sleep. We get horrible insomnia, and progesterone, for me, this is the thing we're not supposed to do, but it's shown in research. I was waking up 5 or 6 times a night after being like a champion sleeper. It was like someone hit me with a large frying pan at 11, and then I wake up at 6. And unless you launched a nuclear warhead into my front yard and causing my dog to bark, I mean, I was out all night. And then 5 or 6 times a night, and you have brain fog, and your brain is not being cleaned. There's something called the lymphatic system, and your cerebral spinal fluid washes through your brain. This is Macon Nergard's research. This really cool, amazing woman who found this out. Unless you're sleeping well, which causes your brain to shrink if you get enough deep sleep, your brain is just filled with this neural trash. Basically, I describe it like the backseat of a teenager's car with like Taco Bell wrappers and everything. But you're not clearing out the neural trash. So the next day you wake up, you're sick, and you have brain fog. It's really terrible. And the sleep that you get from progesterone, for me, that corrected it. For many, many, many women, it does. And that's one of the things, that's why the doctor's not knowing is so terrible. And they give you, by the way, Kaiser, the reason I had 3 battles with them to get the drug I needed, the amount I needed, and get it covered, because they give you medroxyprogesterone acetate. That's on their formulary, not progesterone. And again, this is FDA approved progesterone, same as your body makes, but just in a little capsule form. And you cannot take, by the way, women who take lotions, progesterone lotion, first of all, ordering off Amazon or other sites online, it's the wild, wild west, the supplement world. but it does not properly protect your endometrium, the uterine lining, and the breasts. And so it is very dangerous. And this is why, you may have an aversion to medical care, to going to getting traditional medical care. But really, what I found as somebody who was prejudiced against taking drugs at all was, my God, these are really protective and important drugs. And you're not taking prescription NyQuil. You're taking hormones that your body, needed in perimenopause. And then the notion is, from feminists, and prior as a feminist, Susan Love was the late Susan Love, a feminist. So they were angry at the notion of estrogen deficiency in menopause. Like, women our natural state is deficient. Oh my God, let me tell you, yes, it is. When you're talking about the brain. So I have ADHD. So my dopamine and norepinephrine are already like, hi, where are you? And so they then in menopause for everybody, for women in general, they drop, the levels drop. So I already had those issues in that area. And I saw such a terrible decline in my cognitive ability to remember things. The funny thing was, I'm in this extreme nerd meetup group. We read homework, for the group, we debate it. And we had a party, and I told Vishal, who runs our group, Vishal, I'm going to start taking estrogen on Tuesday. My memory will probably be better by then. And he said, this is the 5th time you told me this tonight, and so I can't actually tell you because it's hard to know, like, wait, was it better? Is it better now? I'm not good at that naturally, but also it's hard to know because things are gradual. But I do sense that I'm sharper than when I'm not taking it. That's my belief anyway. And that's what the research says, that it's helpful for this.
What about I see functional, I live part-time in Mexico, and I see a functional medicine
You're
doctor.
so cool. I want to be your best friend. Shop up in LA.
Friend. I love it. And so the transdermal hormonal cream versus the pellet, like I've had this conversation with him, how if you get like the pellet and the butt hormones, it's much harder to self-regulate. And then you need blood tests to test versus just having bioidentical we'll just say high quality from a trusted source, transdermal creams for hormones, whether it's progesterone or the estradiol. Any research on that versus like the whole idea here is that, well, there's a few things that I want to say. So I'm going to go back to that earlier conversation about evolution in women and HRT over time. So there's interesting, and again, I look at citizen data, right? So what have people been doing for longer than we've been doing double-blind studies, right? So like intermittent fasting, we have studies maybe since the lab rat studies on calorie restriction from the 1930s, and before that we don't have studies, but we do have 10,000 years of evidence base looking at like what evolutionary human brain size. So in the same way, and I don't think a lot of people know this, although some of my listeners know exactly what I'm going to say, which is that there is evidence that in Chinese medicine that the Chinese were using urine. So we pee out everything that's basically in our blood, right? Ultraplasma filtrate. And so the way the Chinese were doing HRT, particularly the men, were using it's like right in that prepubescent. So before prepubescent. So if you're a man, you're using boys. If you're a woman, you're using girls, and you're using it right when their growth hormone is high, stem cell production's high, and then hormone production is surging. So like right when they're going through puberty, but they're not yet. I know this is like, for a lot of people, it's radical, but to me, it's very interesting to understand that humans have been doing HRT for thousands of years.
So, but the problem there is that hormones, when a girl is going through puberty, the hormone, they're all messed up and unstable. So you don't actually know what you're getting. And see, the problems in these things, so, the butt hormones, the pellets and stuff, the problem is simply...
Wait, before we go back to butt hormones, I just think it's fascinating to realize that humans have been doing HRT for thousands of years. So
I think so too.
There,
I think so too.
And the way they were using it, right? If we look at then how it was transdermal, right? So and the crazy thing about...
Wait, it was how was that? Wait, I thought they were maybe drinking the urine?
And skin.
Oh, they put it on their skin?
Yeah, you can put it on your skin. It dries into a salt as well. So then it becomes like a carrier. So you can take someone, again, I know this is far out there. I know there's no research on it, except for there's a lot of citizen data, right? There's a lot of people who've been doing it for a long time in different countries.
But we don't know if it actually goes into the bloodstream and levels.
We know they were using it. We know in Chinese medicine they were using it. Just hard stop. Like just absorb. I think as a species, and looking at a species that we tend to keep doing things that work, right? So if something doesn't work, it usually fizzles out of a holistic, we could say, longevity system. It'll just fizzle out, right? Because there's so many millions of things to try and do. There's so many experiments humans have run over thousands of years. Like we're not new to running experiments on ourselves. That's what yoga's about. So if we look at yoga in Taoism, there's a lot of these practices, Zen, there's a lot of systems with practices over time that are cultivated around human evolution. Now, in the Chinese medicine system and in the Indian medicine system, in both systems, we find Shivambu, or using urine therapy. Now, what we know about how the Chinese men were using it is they were using it as a rejuvenant. So to me, it's just fascinating, right? And that was a lot of like what guided me to write on Inflamed and Primal Habits. It's like, what is the stuff besides intermittent fasting, right? Besides cryotherapy, what are the things that humans have been doing for a very long time that are helping them feel younger, live younger, etc.? So then, we could go back to the transdermal.
Okay,
cream
so
versus the pellet.
The problem with any of this, it's really the safety thing. And that's what I emphasize because, in writing this book, my greatest terror was that I would make an error. I sent this out to people and I told them to get people to criticize you properly, you have to say, hand me my ass, kick my ass, tell me I'm an idiot, and seriously get them to understand that you value like any pushback that they give you. It's that, but also, I look at this, like, what's the validation for something? And I don't agree with you that people, the fact that people have done things for a while means that they're good. I think we have beliefs that they're good, and we don't know what the effects are. And also, like, I'll hear some of these practices and I'll know why, like with the, urine, the instability of those hormones, and does putting urine on your skin. See, transdermal, that's a steroid hormone, and it's the powerful amount of it, and the amount in urine wouldn't be very much. I don't really recall. I mean, you read
So there aren't, and back to your point, it's like, what are their studies on? Their studies on pharmaceuticals.
Well, yes,
because who pays for studies is the pharmaceutical companies.
And believe me.
And then back
Sorry, I didn't mean
it's interesting, right? It's like, it's kind of an interesting thing to like, wow, this is rising in different countries. This is being preserved in their medical literature, right? Over a long time, right? Where we've got like this, some of the stuff, it's in the Pali Canon, it's in Vedic texts, it's in Chinese medicine texts. And so they would dry it. Urine dries into a salt. So it becomes a more potent, when all the water, you're right, as far as like the actual 95% is water. So once that evaporates, now you have a more potent medicine. Just to answer that question.
Okay, but
we can leave it.
Okay, but I just want to say the reason is, believe me, if we could have the butt implants for testosterone, which is not safe for women to take because it's not validated to the extent of longitudinal studies. We don't know that it's safe over long periods of time for breast cancer and the cardiovascular system. There's no FDA approved drug for that. And the reason FDA approved drugs are important, and believe me, I just on Twitter linked to this database of these drugs. They approve drugs that have like so little evidence, that are fraudulently done studies. I am no fan of the FDA. I take them out of my book. They progesterone, the sheet that goes out with progesterone, which is just this wonderful hormone in your body. You have 10 times the amount of progesterone when you're pregnant in your body, 10 times the regular menstrual period amount if you're ovulating. So this is not like, Drano, the body's Drano. It's a body's very healthy hormone. But, they validate, what's important is they validate how it's produced. And by the way, that's not all of what is cracked up to be. Kathy Egren, who's in this group of we're professional nonfiction writers, we help each other. She has a book called Bottle of Lies about the Indian generics industry. It's so horrible. I would not take drugs from India or China. And Chinese studies, there's so much fraud there. So you have to know those things. And so, but the problem with all of these is that they're not validated for effectiveness and safety. We don't know how much you're getting. Compounding pharmacies are notoriously bad. If you have to use a compounding pharmacy, you need to use one that's PCAB certified, that's accredited to maybe be better than, the others where you could get the wrong amount, the wrong stuff. Are you getting Viagra with your estrogen? You don't really want that. And so I'm just careful about safety for women. And that's why, I look at all of this, and transdermal is the safest form to take. And by the way, I laugh when you said urine, because the initial Women's Health Initiative studies, they were giving women conjugate, I always say cognitive, I have to correct, conjugated equine estrogen, which is horse pee estrogen, that a whole bunch of, like a cocktail of estrogens from these horses.
Yeah, Premarin, right?
Yeah. Premarin, and there's Premarin, and I'm forgetting the one with medroxyprogesterone acetate. Terrible. That's a synthetic knockoff of progesterone. It binds with the wrong receptor in the breast, preferentially the glucocorticoid stress hormone receptor. It elevates your risk of breast cancer, whereas progesterone, the kind in your body, the kind that's FDA approved, it does something very, very important, which is it causes generic breast cells to differentiate, to specialize. So basically it gives these delinquent cells, they're generic, they can do anything, a special job, being breast cells. And so once it does that, it causes them to specialize. They can't just double and create cancer. That's very, very important. And that's why you want this as opposed to the drug that elevates your risk. And this is the terrible stuff. This is why I wrote this, because you cannot know this stuff unless you do what I do. I'm really kind of a science mole rat. I sit here day and night. I didn't go anywhere, Christmas, New Year's, anywhere for Thanksgiving for the past 2 years, because I just stayed home and worked. And it's like my joy, because I wanted to put in every bit of time I could till I had to actually turn the book in, to make sure it was correct, to find as much evidence I could in different areas. So you're covered across the board: brain, psychology, bones, all these areas. The bone area is the fraud in that from the, Merck Pharmaceuticals started this idea of bone mineral density as a measure of quality bones, which it completely isn't. It doesn't measure quality. It measures how much bone stuff do you have in this little square. And by the way, the drugs that they give you, the drugs called bisphosphonates, what
like
they do, they cause your bones to be more brittle and micro-cracked within a 3-year span. So they harm you in 3 years. But those drugs, they simply cause the old bone, the old tired bone that would be cleared away by cells called osteoclasts. I remember osteoclast cutters, see? And the osteoblast B builders. The builders are slower than the cutters. So it just had you hang on to old crappy bone. Well, that's not quality bone. You create quality bone through lifting weights, through challenging your bones. What you do for muscles, you do for bones. You lift a heavy weight. I do slow speed weight training. I talk about this in the book. It is the most efficient and powerful form of exercise to protect your bones. And also, it protects against insulin resistance and inflammation. Your bones and muscles are metabolically active. So it's doing this slow speed weight training to muscle failure. So you do 10 reps only with weights heavy for you. And when I say only, the weights have to be heavy enough that you can only lift them slowly, 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down. It's very slow. It's really awkward at first. And then that you can't do another one after around 8 or 10 without, that squirming, and that you can get injured that way. So you stop then. That's called muscle failure. You created tiny tears in your muscles. So over the period of repairing, you don't want to do the same exercise the next day, the tiny tears repair, and that's muscle health. That's muscle being built, quality muscle, because you've challenged your bones and your muscles. You've told them, hey, you're needed. Lift this stuff. And if you're not lifting, if you're just doing what doctors advise at Kaiser, if you're walking, this is so horrible. Walking's good. You're not sedentary, but unless you're carrying an elephant, you're not putting enough weight simply with your own body on your bones. And this is horrible if they tell you to do this as a way to have healthy bones.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's so many inversion postures in yoga, right? Where you're forced to hold your body weight and to move your body in different positions. So when we look from an Ayurvedic medicine perspective on tissue formation, it goes plasma to blood to muscle to fat to bone marrow to reproductive fluid to the immune system. So it's a step down approach. There's this deep understanding of you need really good blood flow, a lot of vitality to build good muscle. You need good muscle to build good refined fat tissue. Otherwise, your fat tissue is flabby. And then the job of the fat tissue is to create a high quality bone tissue. So it's a really fascinating pathogenesis. It's very different pathogenesis than Western pathogenesis.
But see, what you're talking about is so wise. You're looking at the body as a system. And this is what doctors I see don't do. They look at an individual lab number. They're not saying, okay, how's your blood? How's your body fat? Are you inflamed? All of these things, they'll look at one lab number and then go, that's the symptoms as disorders error. They'll treat that symptom. Well, okay, but you're not looking at, because you're not looking at the whole body, you don't even know the context of that symptom. And typical of this is LDL, they're called bad cholesterol. Well, no, because it depends if you're in an inflamed, metabolic, unhealthy state. And if you're not, if you're like me, I have high LDL. Well, it's healthy. They had it tested. They do a particle test. And if you get that, I tell you in the book, HDL particles tested too. My particles are large, bouncy, fluffy clouds of LDL. So those don't go into the arteries, like slip in like the small, dense, unhealthy ones that are oxidized, basically rusted, and lead to heart disease and other metabolic problems. So my LDL, I simply have high LDL because, why? Because I eat a carnivore diet. And I was eating low carb since 2009 and went carnivore just to do it for 2 weeks. And I felt so great. And it really keeps my inflammation down. I eat a lot of fish and I'm able to do that cheaply. My new thing's canned mackerel, so cheap. And I make this soup with the herring and clam juice and everything and broth. It might sound disgusting to people. It's fantastic. Chili, ginger, Old Bay, because I'm a heathen. I'm a culinary heathen. Salt, pepper. That's it. And then butter and heavy whipping cream, a little bit of each. This is delicious. I make a big thing of it. I have it to eat, and so you're really being healthy. You're eating all healthy things, a lot of omega-3, and these are not the heavy mercury fish. So you can do that and not be, wealthy. You can eat, herrings in a tin. I get 12 for $20 at Amazon, and it's like of those tins. And I have it, so people talk about, fat, when I'm hungry, I'm going to be out and buy a bag of Doritos. I always have a little thin tin of herring with me with a fork wrapped around it, a little napkin from my grandma, a cloth napkin. It's in my purse or somewhere. It's not heavy. And so I'll eat that rather than eating junk. And you just
and it's common. Like if you go, it reminds me of being on the coast in Portugal and Spain, and you go into any little tienda, and there's these little jars or these little beautiful tins of sardines and herring and the fish that they're describing.
Wonderful. Oh, and by the way, I ate sardines before. I really like them, but I found out that they're exceptionally high in omega-6, which is inflammatory. So are chicken thighs. This is I want to have a funeral for not eating them anymore because they're so fatty and delicious and wonderful. But I stopped because I have a genetic eye disease called, well, I say it the bad way, Fuchs dystrophy, corneal endothelium is a one cell layer. It's the plumber of the eye. The cells die out there and then you slowly go blind. It's so horrible. And so when I got transplant surgery, they transplant someone else's this one cell layer. Is so amazing. It's why I'm an organ donor. This person gave me the gift of vision by donating this upon their death.
Wow.
This allowed me to see, but to heal, I thought I'm going to go SWAT team on inflammation. I cut up bacon and pork rinds. So sad, but also anything else that was high in omega-6 because I needed to help my body be as metabolically powerful as possible. And these are the things that occurred to me. And when you're younger, we don't look at things, unless there's a fire, we don't, call the fire department. We stand outside my house. Well, also because they're hot. I love firemen. But so what happens in menopause, you see that your body is less robust in a number of ways. And so it made me really be careful saying, not that I'm going to deprive myself of things, but the way I look at it is that I don't want to do this because that'll cause my health to be compromised and you feel really good. And so I also, you can't just deny yourself everything. So if I'm at a party, I don't eat carbs, but I do this like searching analysis of chocolate chip cookies. Were these made by a vegan with this like stuff that's not like butter and the stuff that goes into classic chocolate chip cookies? I'll analyze that. Then I'll analyze which one to eat, which one like is the great like white chocolate dark, and then I'll eat 3. But I don't go to parties very often. And so before that I would eat ice cream maybe once a month. But that was necessary. Again, the doable thing, you don't want to binge, but I can't have, again, I'm a pig. hedonistic pig. So I can't have ice cream in my house. And I only have, what do I have? Those, there's some kind of crackers I really like, but they change them that I have for when I'm throwing up. And I hide them behind towels on this high shelf. It's not Triscuits. Oh, darn. Wheat Thins. Oh my God. They used to be so good. Now they're disgusting. They cut the sugar in them. Like, look, if I'm going to be sick at 3 a.m, like why can't I have the crappy stuff with the sugar in it for like once? So it's sad, but that's what you have to do. You have to recognize that you're a grabby, lazy, hedonistic chimp, and take steps to not, be that. But also, you have to have self-compassion and forgive yourself. If you go off the rails a little bit, that's really important. And it comes from looking at things as systems, not goals. And a system, like you were talking about the body. So the system is, I'm going to work to be, healthy. I'm going to invest in that in my life. And then the goal is, I'm not going to eat this thing at lunch. And not doing humans, this is something I know from all my behavioral science background. We don't have a not do, we have a do.
Yeah.
So you want to replace things rather than I'm going to have a not do. So it's like, I'm going to eat this instead, or I'm going to distract myself, sing the alphabet backwards or whatever to like try to forget that I'm, going kooky.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty behind research with adversity habits. Is it's like point yourself to doing the hard things. What we found in Club Thrive is do the hard things together. It's why I teach it.
That's
Wellness
wonderful.
Pro Academy. It's
oh
like
my God,
if we can
that's
be in
wow.
clubs that are committed to the long-term results that we want, and then what are the habits that are hard to do? Well, it's easier to do together. And then if we're reinforced by other people who are in those similars, ups and downs, but with the same trajectory for desired evolution, that it's magic what happens. And then we have much more
magic.
connection
So
and
smart.
intimacy and up level. And it's the way that yoga communities and enlightenment communities, whether they're like a Zen Buddhist community in a Sangha or a yoga community in a Gurukula, have always pulled together the people. It's like basically like a magnetic pull to the people that most want to evolve, because in those protected circles, and protected from the sense of we know what we're doing and why we're doing it together, there's so much more rapid evolution and insulation from what common culture is doing. And I feel like that's not really that well understood, that like there's more of the sense of I need to do it alone, or these habits, this carnivore diet or this elimination diet or this whatever paleo vegan diet is like only I need to do it. Whereas when I find like-minded people who are going in the same direction, it's so much more fun. And you actually don't feel like you're the exception or the one that's eliminating. You're more of like, oh, I get to actually run even better experiments for myself. And that's how these evolutionary communities and these medicine systems and Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine evolved, right? It was from people running experiments together.
I just want to endorse from, reading this area on cooperation and social support. This is like the smartest. This is so wonderful you do this, because really, I tell people to do this. Who I talk to, I do private sessions with people about this, where I help them be at their best to follow through and have good habits. And that's what I say. A woman's doing it with her husband. She's doing the weight training with her husband. They both go to the gym now. So they reinforce each other. And it's harder to reinforce things for yourself. Although what you were talking about in my book on F-wordology, my favorite chapter in the book is your feelings are not the boss of you. I use this on myself all the time. Oh, do you not want to do this? Well, poor you. Your feelings don't get to run the show here. Tell your feeling to F off and then do it. Like just pick up your feet and move. You might not want to move, but I find that when I make myself move, then I move more, because you've gotten into it and whatever. But the social support, I mean, the way you describe the communities, this is so vital for continuing to do this and for getting support when you sort of, fall by the wayside, and it just is a way for people to feel good. So other people will give them props for doing what they've done, because we often don't do it for ourselves. And I really encourage that acknowledge what you've done. Did you eat better today? Or did you go over and pitch somebody on your idea where you would have been scared yesterday? Well, that is a badass and fantastic. And it's what's called a small win from this guy, White, classic social psychology. And so the question he asks is like, how will you stop world hunger? And we just collapse like, I don't know. But like my sister, she makes sandwiches and takes them around to homeless men in her San Francisco neighborhood and gives them sandwiches and talks to them. So she is doing something meaningful,
Mm.
on this small level. I wouldn't eat my sister's food, but that's not just a little weird. But I love that she does this, and they apparently like what she makes. So, but I just think you're wonderful because you look at things that nobody thinks about, like these things about the body as a system, such important thinking, and the social support. I feel like you really spread a lot of good and health in the world because you do what I do, which is applied science. It's effective advice, not just telling people, okay, here's sainthood. You do this and you're going to be a saint. And no one can do it. We stop after, a day, or we never get to it because it's too overwhelming. And
Yeah.
your realism on this and your like kindness and understanding of people, like the empathy toward people, I think makes you connect with people and makes you help people be not makes you, but help people be healthy on a level they couldn't if you didn't have these insights.
Yeah, we see it. Yeah, we see people doing. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing with the East meets West, the kind of transformations that are completely out of wildest dreams. I get, and yes, I do. I orient everything to that. So I'm curious. Like you've worked in a number of these different areas, from applied psychology to mediator, and I'm just curious. Like what's next? Well, actually, I just want to mention that conflict resolution TED Talk is really great for those who are
Thank
interested
you.
in Amy's work. She's got some great stuff on YouTube, including the Joe Rogan interview. So what's next for you?
Well, actually, I am going to do a Substack. If anyone wants to subscribe, it's subscribers with an S at amyalkon.net. So subscribers at amyalkon.net. And I would encourage you to buy my Going Menopausal book. It's the best thing I've ever done. Even if you don't want to, it's not a book about like take hormones, because the stuff on diet and exercise and then rethinking the stigma of aging. I'm 61. I will tell you 12 times in 2 weeks that I'm 61 because I don't buy the stigma. I wear
Yeah.
evening dresses as day wear. And so I encourage women to be like loud and proud and old. We're great. I'm a much better person than I was at 35.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And so what I realized though is the thing that lights me on fire. I'm still going to do this stuff on conflict resolution. This is actually having healthy conflict. Conflict's good. It's just if you fear it and dread it and you don't bring out what's bothering you in a factual way, or realize some of this stuff. If you want to look up my TED Talk, it's listening to learn instead of fighting to win. That it sometimes takes a series of conversations. You don't just expect things to happen right away. So all of these things, they're very important. In fact, I'm giving a talk this week. I'm hired by the LA City Attorney's Office where I volunteer as a mediator to do free dispute resolution for LA residents when I'm not on book hiatus. They're hiring me to give a talk on how behavioral science can make mediators more successful in their work, getting resolutions and facilitating these conversations. But as I was saying, the thing that lights me on fire is showing, here's what they say. Here's what people believe about how we should conduct ourselves health-wise in this area or that, or here's the study and debunking, where it goes wrong. And so that's going to be a substantial part of my Substack, but also have the stuff where people ask questions about relationships and where, I, as this inveterate reader, books, people are very lazy in writing. They'll write all this wordage, and then there'll be like one jump-in idea and then another one over here. And you could just buy those two things, like for price was like $2, whatever. And you could have here's the two things that are really worthwhile. And so what I'm going to do is pull those out of a book. And some are, of course, great, and have those book gems. And then people can ask questions, and you can also fight with me and tell me I'm an idiot. I always actually like that from readers. And I don't actually give advice. So I don't tell people what to do, because that's actually, we know psychological reactance, that's rebellion. If you tell people what to do, they rebel. It's like a loss of freedom that we see in their future.
Yeah.
But so I'll say, you might do this, or here, I lay things out so you can make the conclusion for yourself. That's the most successful way, to let people know, here's this wise thing, and you show it in absurd terms. That's where the humor comes in, and how I lay things out, because you can sort of see things better if you're relaxed and laughing sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny. Often it's like I'll talk about a topic, and then with members, it's like I'll ask what advice they would give to themselves. And I find that is so,
That's
smart.
what I mean?
Right? It's like once they have different information, then they can give themselves
right.
advice, and it kind of deactivates that rebellious. Because
that's sort of like, it's called motivational interviewing. And I always advocated this. And this is what this is. It's from addiction treatment. And it involves, so people be doing some kind of behavior. So you ask them about that. You ask them about their values, or maybe their values. And then you just say, oh, okay. So how does that work with what you value this? So how do these two work together? And so they have to process it. You're asking them a question. And this is you can't be defensive if you're answering a question like that. I guess you could, but this thing where people start to think, well, and they go off on, this searching tangent as opposed to defending tangent. And so that's very, very helpful. And you have to relinquish this idea that we have that things should happen right away. I need to be successful now. Sometimes you plant a seed and you go away and then you go check on the seed, water the seed a little bit, but not push. And you have to, really be careful that you're doing things not just for you to vent, but for you to actually help somebody in the way they need to be helped. Like giving advice, I see this. People give advice. Here's what I would do. No. You have to look, who's that person? What's comfortable for them? And so my agent, she has 2 teenage boys. These boys eat teenage boys, they're, insane, like dinosaurs in their eating habits, how much food. And so she needs to serve chicken thighs because otherwise they'll be living in a dumpster. Because the boys eat them out of hospital, literally. And so what works for her is not what I would do, but it's what she needs to do. So you give advice like that, you listen, and you're helping the person. You're not just, hey, I'm going to sound off. Aren't I an expert? No, you're a jerk.
Yeah. Do you have time for one final question?
Oh, yeah. I'll stay on. You're fantastic. I love you. I'll stay on all day.
Amy, you're amazing. So I'm just curious, what is... just as a writer who has a lot of books, I'm curious about how AI will affect writers. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, especially in the book market. What are, I know there's a lot of tools out there that writers are using. I use Claude because I can have my books in Claude, but I use it more for marketing writing than for actual writing. But I'm just curious, as AI starts to produce books, what do you see happening in the humans in book writing?
There's just a conversation. Joyce Carol Oates, I follow her and like her a lot. Yeah. And we were talking about this. And the thing is, you cannot create the stuff about a person, where that causes you to write interesting, deep stuff. They can fake that, but faking it's totally different. It's like soulless writing. And by the way, all these, ChatGPT especially, they lie. I never ask ChatGPT for anything I don't already know, science-wise, because I'll just, what's the name of whatever? So, and I found this out. I'm in this extreme nerd group. My one of my closest friends is a quantum physicist at Google. I call him Quantum Jonathan. I have him, the physicist, come over my lampshade. I have a lampshade emergency. It's tilting. He uses his physics ability, but from knowing all these guys, that's how I got to be an early adopter of AI. And I asked ChatGPT to alphabetize my horrible mess of a bibliography. Oh my God. First of all, it removes entries that I needed to have in the book, and then it just invents them. It makes up in the format a scientist who doesn't exist, a study that doesn't exist. Wow. Horrified. The hilarious thing is, so I go to my group of the boy geniuses and some girl geniuses, mostly boys, but they're amazing women there. SpaceX engineer. Oh my God. So nobody knows what I should do. How do I alphabetize my bibliography? And one of the writers, Stephen Moon, who write with me, we're on Google Hangout on mute. Steph says, I think Word does that. And sure enough, it did. So all was fine, but I asked them for things like, where do I find this thing to make this thing on the internet work? Or can I hook up a bidet to my toilet? Here's the photograph of the toilet of my ancient house, but nothing of, any scientific consequence.
Yeah. So let's take that. So we'll just say categorically, at least for the time being, AI won't write anything that will not be able to write what we would find interesting or accurate. Well, but then let's just go to the sheer quantity of books that will be produced that might be of very poor quality and with very inaccurate information in them. I'm guessing that's going to skyrocket.
Oh, yeah. And you see, when you said that about, quality, people don't necessarily know what quality is. You see these things where people say, write a book in an hour. Right. Really? I can't write a paragraph in an hour sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
Often, actually. And because when you're a professional writer, like at a level where it's respect for readers, I must give you something of value. It must have good rhythm. It must, my book, this is terrifying stuff and going menopausal, about cancer and your bones eroding and everything. And so what I needed to do, because I actually am funny, is because not a lot of people are, think they're funny, but I needed to give you some vacations from the medical stuff, and I explain stuff in everyday language. So I'm already, it's accessible. I wrote this. There's actually over there on my router. It says write every page of this book for Pamela D. So this is my favorite shuttle. LA Now is like a bus that takes us to our meetup. The LA DOT bus. And she's smart, but she doesn't read science. She's a regular, like smart person. And
Yeah.
so it's written for people like her, who are ordinary people who want to understand their medical care. She was betrayed by her doctor. She had a really bad, she's Black. And so Black women and me have the worst hot flashes, like horrible hot flashes. Her doctor said like, oh, eventually they'll stop. So like tough it out. Like, tough it out, because as I said, progesterone, that would have been the solution in perimenopause. Progesterone protects, your body and your bones, your endometrium and everything. So she might not have been getting, adequate progesterone. I tell you actually how to test this yourself. See, I love your, like the DIY thing and of the, citizens, helping citizens. So you can test whether or not you are ovulating using a $9.99 digital thermometer and logging your first morning temperature. This is in my book. It comes from that fabulous endocrinologist, Erlen Pryor, and a guy named Volman, who did the research initially in Switzerland. Because there's an elevation of temperature with ovulation,
Yeah.
you need to have the certain days, elevated number of days. It's all in there. Quantitative basal temperature, not like the fertility monitoring, which, by the way, bad science. The menstrual cycle isn't 28 days. So all these women desperate to get pregnant and using those ovulation trackers, oh my God, what a horrible betrayal. That's in my book too. The editor tried to cut it out. This is not a book about, women having babies. Like, no, we leave it in because women will tell their friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
I fought for that. And so the QBT thing, you can go to your doctor with legitimate medical data. This is legitimate, even though it's DIY. You just write it down. You can write it not even on a phone. I'm not a big phone person like that, living long, write it on a paper, calendar, color it in a calendar, put the temperature for the right days and say, look, I'm not sleeping. This is an indication. Here's the page you can photograph the page of my book on QBT showing that I am not ovulating and not making progesterone for an adequate number of days or at all. And ovulation, we have anovulatory, so no ovulation periods that seem just like other periods. But what happens is especially in perimenopause, we start to have these weak follicles, like the eggs are in, wimpy, that they never rupture the follicles. And they need to rupture. If the follicle ruptures, the litter left over, it's called the corpus luteum, this yellow waxy stuff, that becomes progesterone. And if you have enough days of progesterone to grease your mental health. Otherwise, my mental health, and I'm like this nice, happy, rational person. It was like rims on the highway in one of our California freeway chases. There was a man, this nice man, like my Midwestern dad at the hardware store. He was behind me because he was going to fix something in his house. I'm like, nice. He's humming. This for me is like the most egregious thing a human being could do. I seriously want to find a heavy object and bludgeon this lovely man. And I would have at any other time been like, oh, he's humming just like my grandpa. I was a hateful person, and you're ashamed because you don't know, because doctors can't diagnose you. They don't know. They're all the doctors who are the maternity specialists being made unethically. It's against medical ethics. We have no expertise. They're being made to treat menopausal and perimenopausal women by their departments. They just do it because that's what's done. This is horrible, unethical. And you're being, basically, it's like being treated by like the lady on Grey's Anatomy, who's an actor, like very attractive, nice lab coat, but they're just actors in lab coats because they don't have experience in the area you need to diagnose you properly and to treat you if you want treatment. It's absolutely, who would imagine this? And that's why I wrote this book, because it's all this, every area is, oh my God, how can this be? It's terrible. It's such a betrayal of women.
Yeah, that's what I found when I was writing Uninflamed. I was like, the difference between the science and the medicine is insane right now. And that gap, it's like you really need people that around you that are giving you agency, first of all, right? So that like You're more interested in your own health than anyone else's. So act like it, right? And this idea of finding your people, finding whether it's the books, the doctors, the holistic practitioners that you resonate the most with, and then if you're in someone that's just covered by your HOA and you're not agreeing with what they're saying, or you're feeling like you're not being heard or listened to, you're probably not. So it's like that agency, right? Of you need to look elsewhere.
Oh, yeah.
You need to take your health. You need to take charge. And this whole idea of doctors knows best, this era, especially for older women, is rapidly coming to a close.
No, and I don't know if I have time, but part of my book is telling women how to approach their doctors, how to stand up. I have 6 questions to ask your doctor before agreeing to treatment, because you need to find out, are they giving you evidence-based medical care? Is the diagnosis, that's one of the other myths of medicine, that doctors are trained in diagnostic reasoning. Who would think this? And that also the other myth is that doctors can properly assess risk. So doctor, what's my risk of breast cancer if I take this? It is the rare doctor who can tell you properly. And you know what? The medical education is so egregious that they don't change this. Gerd Gigerenzer, he's a psychologist and risk assessment expert. I quote in my book, he's really behind getting doctors trained like this. He can teach doctors in 90 minutes, and it just takes what's called natural frequency. So I'll tell you, so it's not mystical. So we don't do well. We didn't evolve with percentages. We evolved with things. There's a tree, there's another tree. So if you just draw 100 people on a page, that's our natural frequency, our natural way of seeing things. And you color in the 2 who are going to be sick or die. And then we factor in, okay, what's your individual medical risk? What are your stats? Okay, maybe we color in another half person, or we erase one of the people because maybe you're super, healthy in this area. And then you present it to the patient. So they are able to make informed choices. It's called informed consent. If you aren't informed, you can't consent. And that's what the 6 questions, if you want, I'll read them, are for. They're to see. Yeah. Okay, so the 6 questions to ask your doctor before agreeing to treatment, they're in Going Menopausal, along with the other stuff. Can you lay out your reasoning behind your diagnosis and the treatment you're recommending? If they can't, maybe that's not so reasoned. Could there be other conditions that are causing my symptoms? What are the risks? What are my risks from this treatment? Are there safer, less invasive alternatives? What can I expect during the treatment, and what sort of recovery? And do I need to do this now, or could I wait or go without the treatment? And your doctor, if they don't explain things understandably, ask them to re-explain it. You might have to make a separate appointment with them, little 20-minute chunks at Kaiser. And, doctors can be expensive for people who don't have coverage. But I see this, I'm really frugal. You can see $1 earrings and this is Wet n Wild makeup. I'm not Chanel, but the thing I'll pay for is my health. That's the one thing. And I would, and so don't think of me as some kind of wealthy woman. Believe me, you write a book for 8 years. I'm living off my IRA at this point and terrified. So, it's just the right thing to do because it's your lifetime health, and it's either suffering, which fork will you take, the path to suffering or not suffering? And if you just know the science, and this is the thing that's such a betrayal. I see on Reddit and all these places, Menopause Reddit, that all these women really have no idea of what's safe, what's science, there's scientific evidence to warrant, and then how to assess things where there isn't, like breast cancer. The research is it's called heterogeneous, meaning this study is on this group of women. They're, 17-year-olds, and then this one's on elderly women, and this one used this hormone, and then this, use it with this other hormone. I mean, you can't have that kind of muddle and come to anything conclusive. So my chapter there, I'm very proud of it. I say to the readers, I'm really sorry. I was desperate to say, answer the question, does this cause cancer or does it not? And I can't. But here's what we know. The thing I said before about the receptors. If you have, it's actually from research on receptors by Catherine Horwitz, amazing pioneer, and Carol Sartorius, where they find that if you have cancer existing, that progesterone and estrogen are not carcinogens themselves, but they can run with it. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of that chapter, I say, now this is me with my individual health. I don't have a risk of gallbladder disease, and I see that cardiovascular disease is a big killer of women. And so I'm going to take estradiol, I'm going to choose to that and progesterone with it. Because of that, I'm going to get mammograms, and I'm terrified. I've dense breasts. I can't see anything. And it's like looking at a rock. So, it's scary, and it is a risk for me, but that's where there's a trade-off. And I say, don't do what I do, but this is how you look at things and make a decision according to your own level of risk.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, I want to just remind everyone of your book and of your website. So this has been Amy Alkon, and you can find her at amyalkon, ALKON.net. And the book is Going Menopostal.
Menopostal. And you can find it on my website. It's at Indies and also at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And then very importantly, not everybody reads. So, Carrington McDuffie, she's this incredible singer and voice artist. She read my audiobook. She reads all my books. And I used to produce commercials and cast Eartha Kitt, if you know who she is, for a fish sticks commercial. I had to go to Manchester and record her. I'm really good at casting. And so she is fantastic, reads my humor right, really smart. So she makes that really enjoyable. So if you're not a reader, get my book in audiobook form, and she will just take you on a wonderful ride.
Yay.
Yay. You're amazing. I love you. I want to talk to you soon.
All right, you guys. Hello, listeners. So I have created for the wellness pros out there who listen to this show, the Wellness Pro Launchpad, and I'll get you in for free. Just go to wellnesspro.academy /launchpad. LAUNCHPAD, Launchpad, and then just fill out the form and we'll get you right into this school classroom in here. And in the Launchpad, it's really cool. Like, you get to see yourself as the hero in the path of the Wellness Pro, and then your client's transformation in A to B, and your vibe and your brand, your investment story, and design the journey for your clients, patients, or students, and then how to price from results. So these lessons are super short. They're each about 10 minutes, and you'll have a reframe on how to launch and scale the next phase of your wellness career. So wellnesspro.academy /launchpad. And then on the inside, if you really want to launch, you can, like, your next phase of growth as a wellness pro, then you can talk to me. See you soon.